Welcome, everybody, to i4J's fourth interactive video presentation and Q&A session with John Hagel, co-chair of Deloitte's Center for the Edge. John's topic today is when scalable efficiency is a trap. And I was telling John how I put the exclamation mark in there for emphasis because I told him it was his future album title. So David and Vint have been, in their entrepreneurial way, they've encouraged me to host this series for i4J, which is a great organization, but it's not my day job. My name is Ben Baldwin, for those who haven't met me, and I'm the founder of a company, just really brief intro, called Scale Driver, and it's innovation consulting. But instead of consultants, we match executives with innovators, like founders and disruptive CEOs, within this agile framework that actually helps predict innovation and speed it up so everybody succeeds. So I obviously love topics like this. So scalable efficiency, what's important to understand now in the age of post-scalable efficiency, if I could call it that. So I like the idea of using live video specifically because I think it fills the gap between the i4J conferences and the email discussions. It's a very engaged group, and it's a great way to introduce ourselves to the group and share what we're working on in an informal way. So it could also be a way to ask for help. And this Zoom video technology allows for a handful of people or speakers to actually interact in real time with John. So I was joking earlier about heckling him, but you could actually do that if you wanted to unmute yourself. So it's also worth noting that we're recording this session, just to let you know. And all I request is that if you do have a question when the time comes, please just introduce yourself to John and to the audience so that he and we know who you are. And you can also use the chat feature in the video conference to get a hold of me and ask me anything if you need something from me. It's also an open link, so we may have some people join us who are not members of i4J. So with that said, I'll get out of the way and turn it over to John. Take it away, Mr. Hagel.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I picked the topic of scalable efficiency as a trap in part because I enjoy being provocative, and in part because I think it is a central issue as we face the changes that are going on in our business world. If there were ever a sacred cow in the business world, it's scalable efficiency. Every corporate leader aspires to more of that. And so what could possibly be wrong with it? To be clear, I think that it's driven the growth and profitability of large global corporations for decades. So it's definitely been a key to business success in the past. The question, I think, is that rationale of scalable efficiency still as compelling as it used to be? And I like to make the case that it's not, and in fact, it's actually becoming more and more of a trap in the sense of limiting our ability to pursue more opportunities. And in part, the perspective is driven by the research that we've done at the Center for the Edge that I run, around what we call the big shift, but it's the long-term forces that are reshaping the global business landscape. And there are many dimensions to it, but one dimension is that we're moving from a much more stable and predictable environment to one that's shaped by exponential technology, where uncertainty is increasing, volatility is increasing, and extreme events undermine our best laid plans in the business world. So in that kind of world, I think the question is scalable efficiency still the right focus and rationale for building large institutions? And if it's not the right rationale, what is? And I guess, again, from the work we've been doing, our perspective is that there's an alternative rationale that's becoming more and more compelling and that will, in fact, determine the success of large institutions going forward. And it's what we call scalable learning, not scalable efficiency, but scalable learning. And when we talk about learning in this context, I want to be clear up front because most people think about learning in the sense of transfer of knowledge, sharing knowledge more effectively. across groups and across institutions. Our perspective is, while that's still important, the most powerful learning in an exponentially changing world is the learning that comes from creating new knowledge, not just sharing existing knowledge, but creating new knowledge. And that's ultimately going to be the most valuable capability in this big shift world. You know, I've talked to a lot of executives about this concept of scalable learning. And I'd say that the one reaction I get from a lot of executives is that, oh, that's really interesting. We'll do scalable learning and scalable efficiency. We'll do both. And so that they lean back and satisfied. I challenge them, again, partly in the spirit of provocation, but partly because I really believe that these two rationales, scalable efficiency and scalable learning, are in fundamental opposition, that institutions are going to have to choose which one is it. Are we going to pursue scalable efficiency or scalable learning? And the example I give is, if you have scalable efficiency as a key rationale, typically in that kind of environment, predictability becomes absolutely critical. You can't be efficient if you can't be predictable. And predictable requires you to deliver as expected. Failure is not an option. Failure undermines efficiency. And actually, in learning, if you're truly committed to learning, you need to fail a lot. If you're not failing, you're not learning fast enough. So even at that level, it's in contradiction. But then you take it one level deeper and say, well, what kind of environments have we created in our institutions to achieve scalable learning? And essentially what we've done is we've tightly specified all the activities that need to be done within the institution. We have highly standardized those activities so that they're done exactly the same way wherever in the company they need to be done. And we've tightly integrated the activities to eliminate all those inefficient buffers. The buffers are inefficient. We need scalable efficiency, tightly integrate. So what have we done? We've created an environment that's highly specified, highly standardized, and tightly integrated. Now tell me, in that kind of environment, where is the opportunity for learning? Where's the opportunity to improvise, to experiment, to test, to come up with new approaches? There is no room. And in fact, I think that's the reason why when I talk to executives about scalable learning, their immediate focus goes to the training room. Oh, learning. Yeah, we have training programs. We'll take people out of their work environment. We'll put them in these training rooms. They can learn all they want. And then they go back into the work environment and basically pursue the tightly specified, standardized, integrated activities that they were assigned in the first place. So I think we've created an environment that is deeply hostile to learning in our large institutions. And that as a result, it becomes a trap. If you're really pursuing scalable efficiency, it is a trap in the sense that it undermines our ability to learn faster, which at least I believe is absolutely essential for us to succeed in the rapidly changing world around us. And in fact, I would argue this is ultimately the most powerful and most neglected form of innovation. Again, I go into executive boardrooms around the world, and I can guarantee that almost regardless of the company, regardless of the meeting, somewhere on the agenda, innovation is on the agenda. It's being talked about everywhere. And yet when we get to innovation, basically the focus quickly narrows down to product or technology innovation. How can we come up with creative new products, get them into market, and basically reap the benefits of that? Sometimes in more sophisticated companies, we might get to process innovation, maybe even business model innovation, but essentially the discussion stops there. I'd suggest that based, again, on the work we've done at least, there's an even higher level and more powerful level of innovation, which we call institutional innovation, which goes back to the most basic question of all, which is what's the rationale for having an institution to begin with? And really examining and building alignment around what is the rationale that we're going to design our entire institution around. And in that context, moving from scalable efficiency as the core rationale to scalable learning as the key rationale. But that's not even on the agenda of the companies that I deal with. They basically have not even thought about that, much less pursued it in any systematic way. You know, I could go into a lot of detail for those who are interested. We have a lot of research around doing a deeper dive in terms of, so scalable learning, what does that really mean? What would you do differently? I'll just say at a very high level, one element of scalable learning is what I call freeing learning from the prison of the training room. Get it out of the training room and get it into the day-to-day work environment. That's where the most powerful and effective learning could occur and should occur, but does not occur. And if that's where the learning needs to occur, let's take design thinking and design methodologies and systematically rethink our work environments, redesign our work environments to accelerate learning and performance improvement. What would that work environment look like? Not just the physical environment, but also the virtual tools and platforms the workers interact with on a daily basis, the management systems, compensation, recognition systems, the entire worker experience. How would you redesign that if your primary goal was to accelerate learning and performance improvement? We did a major research initiative around this, and we actually couldn't find a single company, again, that had even asked the question, much less pursued it. And so our sense is there's a big opportunity. We found a lot of companies. We did 75 case studies around companies that had done slices of work environment redesign, particular dimensions of the work environment they redesigned, and achieved some pretty significant performance improvement. If you're interested, I can go into some examples on that front. The other piece to scalable learning as a rationale is, I take great inspiration from the quote of Bill Joy, who once made the observation, you know, he said, no matter how many smart people you have within your organization, just remember one thing: there are a lot more smart people outside your organization than inside your organization. So if you're really serious about scalable learning and just focused on the people within the four walls of your company or your institution, you're never going to scale learning to the extent of someone who is systematically reaching out and connecting with third parties, smart people outside the company, so that, and building relationships so that everybody can learn faster together. That's a very different kind of mindset, set of practices, ways to build relationships. So that's another dimension of how you would pursue scalable learning. It requires you to rethink ecosystems and again, broader platforms to connect with third parties. There's another element which I won't go into, but we've again, as a result of some of our work, become very focused on, if you're really serious about scalable learning, it's important to have every participant deeply passionate around the work they're doing. And we draw the distinction between passion and engagement. Lots of companies are focused on worker engagement. Our belief is that's kind of a minimum threshold. But if you don't have people who are really passionate about the work they're doing, they will not learn as fast as someone who is really passionate about the work they're doing. So again, if your goal is to scalable learning, you better find ways to instill that passion within everyone in the workforce. The challenge on that front from the work we've done is that at best, at least in the US workforce, only about 12% of workers have passion around the work they're doing. So there's a huge challenge there. So let me step back in terms of, I've talked about the importance of this shift from scalable efficiency to scalable learning. What does this have to do with the notion of innovation for jobs, which is a key theme that's brought many of us together over a period of a couple of years now, and For those who aren't familiar, I think most of you are looking at the participants. Highly recommend the book Disrupting Unemployment, which brings together perspectives on innovation for jobs. But there are a lot of challenges if you're thinking about innovation for jobs, and I don't want to in any way underestimate them. There's the challenge of just giving people necessary skills. Some people just don't have any skills to be able to join the workforce. We need to give them the skills. We need to connect people who have skills with jobs that have needs for those skills. There's huge inefficiencies in the labor market. So that's a big issue. Overcoming bias in the workforce in terms of blocking many people from the job market, even if they have the necessary skills. So there are a lot of issues, but I'd say one of the biggest challenges that we have is how to redefine work so that it will allow us to thrive in a world of mounting performance pressure, especially in a world where artificial intelligence and robots are becoming much more adept at the jobs we currently perform. And in that context, I want to go back to the scalable efficiency as a trap here, in the sense that if you think about how we have pursued scalable efficiency, tightly specified, highly standardized, tightly integrated activities, what we've just defined is a computer algorithm. Computers, if that's what work is, computers are going to do that much more effectively, efficiently, and reliably than us fallible human beings ever could. So if that's what work is, and that's what work is in a scalable efficiency world, we've created a trap for all of us as individuals. The robots are going to come and get us. It's just a matter of time. Because if that's work, they will do it. Now, on the other hand, if you look at scalable learning, I think it's interesting that it provides an opportunity to redefine work and harness the capabilities that we as humans really have: imagination, creativity, social intelligence, emotional intelligence, and in turn amplify that capability with artificial intelligence and machines. But it gives us more of a definitive role to play. Now, I'm an optimist, and I think that this mounting performance pressure that we see as part of this big shift is going to be a catalyst for a fundamental transformation of work. That it's going to move us from being cogs in the machine of scalable efficiency to creative contributors that can accelerate performance improvements in ways that tap more and more of our potential and our unique individuality. Very different kind of work environment, very different kind of framing of what work really is. But I think the challenge is that the improvement of performance of AI, artificial intelligence, and robots is moving at an exponential pace. Rapid improvement in terms of capability. And on the other side, the institutional barriers that are going to make it challenging for us to move from scalable efficiency to scalable learning and redefine work, as I've talked about, are going to slow us down quite a bit. There are a lot of obstacles, institutional obstacles in our way. So exponential improvement of the robots and artificial intelligence, and the institutional barriers that are going to make it hard for us to redefine work fast enough and to stay ahead of job elimination through automation. And I think in that context, that's where I think ecosystems play a key role. And here I'm talking about intentional ecosystems, ecosystems that we organize to mobilize people and a large number of diverse participants. I think that if we're serious about reframing work and going through this process of institutional innovation, there are a lot of participants, diverse participants, that need to be brought into the game. I mean, it's everything from corporations to schools to civic institutions, governmental bodies. They're all going to have a role to play in contributing to this transition. And I think what's really interesting to me is ecosystems at the end of the day do have powerful network effects. and they have the potential to grow exponentially. So if we're wanting to respond to the exponential growth of technology in terms of artificial intelligence and robotics, I think we better learn how to harness these ecosystems to accelerate the institutional innovation that we need to reframe what work is. I don't think we're going to be able to do any of this alone or in small groups. We need to come together in much broader ecosystems to address both the challenges and the opportunity. And at the end of the day, I think the key challenge and opportunity is not job creation, but work redefinition. If we don't address that challenge, we can create all the jobs we want. They're going to be very short-lived jobs as the artificial intelligence and robotics comes after those jobs, if they're jobs that are defined by scalable efficiency. And so I think that if we're talking about work redefinition, scalable efficiency, again, is a significant trap that's going to impede our ability to make that transition. So that's at least some opening provocation. I hope it invites some good questions and discussion, and looking forward to talking this through.
Thanks, John. That was definitely provocative. Really cool. I will avoid jumping in now. I've already talked. So do we have someone who wants to unmute themselves, introduce themselves, and ask a brief question, please? So we want to share. We have a lot of people who are eager to ask John questions about his topic. So just quick introduction and say we'll rotate questions.
So hi Ben, hi all, this is David Nordfors. Ben, by the way, just a practical question here. If we look at the participants, there's a raise hand and lower hand button. Shall we use that, or?
Up to the physicist to come up with the logical side.
I raised my hand, but then I barged in.
Well, thanks.
Okay, well, anyway, thanks, John. This is brilliant as always, and you always make it sound so simple and natural. This is really important. When I hear you saying that creative discovery is a part of efficient learning, right? And it almost seems to be a key part of it. And I'm wondering if you even want to kind of say that all creative discovery is efficient learning. So basically, well, at work, just we fool around and find things. This is efficient learning. Is this what you think, or is it just a part of it that goes in there?
You know, it depends on how broadly we want to define creative discovery. I think often there's a tendency to think about people in research labs, you know, technicians who are engaged in creative discovery. I think any worker in any work environment can engage in the process of creative discovery, looking for new ways to do things that they currently do and responding. I mean, one of the things that got us on this track was looking at where most people in large companies spend their time. And it turns out anywhere from 60 to 70% of the time spent of most headcount is on what is loosely known as exception handling. Something that didn't fit the policies and processes, standardized processes of the efficient organization, got handed off to an individual, said, resolve this exception. The individual had to figure out who else to engage with this, come up with the relevant data and analytics to come up with a new answer. But it was something that had not been faced before by the company. By definition, these exceptions are new situations. And the process of exception handling is a process of creative discovery. If you're going to effectively handle that exception, you're going to come up with something new and different to respond to something that has never occurred before. So I think in that context, reframing work around this process of creative discovery, you know, inviting people in whatever job, I think everything from janitors in the facility to the research scientists in the lab, really focusing them on how can they identify opportunities or problems or challenges that they or people that they're working with are facing, and come up with creative answers to it. Now we're creating new knowledge. Again, that's a very different kind of learning than, again, just sharing existing knowledge, which I know is also a challenge, but in a more rapidly changing world, it's about creating new knowledge faster.
I think we have Cosmin, your question. Thanks, David. That was
Hi, John.
Hey there.
I'm Cosmin. What I do is what is called cultural intelligence consulting. It's a little bit not necessarily above, but it completes the social and the emotional intelligence, because, you know, being in a world where most cultures interact with each other, emotional intelligence is good within your own known culture or ecosystem. So then when all these ecosystems come together and recreate other types of ecosystems, that's what I try to do. But my question was, if an ecosystem has functions after certain values, beliefs, expectations, symbols, all that stuff, how do you think that we could create, I mean, what kind of values and what kind of belief system these intentional ecosystems that you're talk about would need to have? Because it's like, you know, I'm thinking, it's like in an organization. If you have guys who, you know, like to kind of go out, watch sports and drink beer, then that will attract more of those guys. If you guys have guys who, you know what I'm saying? So the core values and beliefs tend to attract similar people within a group. It doesn't have to be an organization. It can be a neighborhood or a household or whatever, or a nation. So then if we manage to define those values and beliefs, now question to you, which one would it be? An intentional ecosystem, and somehow, you know, get those people together, then those people are
Did he just freeze, or?
With Alan Blue to learn.
Cosmin, you just froze for a second. Can you repeat the last 2 minutes? No, I'm just kidding. Just the last sentence.
What I was saying is that we were talking with Alan Blue about the meta-learning. I mean, the learning to learn. Meta-learning, as Gregory Bateson used to say, right? Yeah. So then we have the kids and we teach them how to learn, not necessarily information which they can find on Google or whatever. So then we create from bottom up these intentional ecosystems, but also, I mean, we can't just kind of, what do? Bomb everybody else who's already, you know, adult? No, but how can we just define those values and beliefs and just kind of promote those, and then people will attract more? And which are those values, beliefs, or however you want to call them? I don't want to impose my semantics here.
Yeah. Thank you. No, great set of questions. I could spend the next half hour just exploring those. I think that certainly culture is key. The values and beliefs are central. It's one of the reasons we've ended up putting a lot of emphasis on passion. And I'll just spend a minute on that, because I think it's, unfortunately, passion is a word that's used so broadly and so loosely that everybody, you know, has a different meaning attached to it. What we came at it by looking at environments where we see sustained extreme performance improvement. We said, in the big shift, we're moving into a world of mounting performance pressure. What can we learn from environments where they are delivering sustained extreme performance improvement? Unfortunately, we couldn't find a lot of business environments where that was occurring. But we did find in areas like extreme sports, big wave surfing, extreme skiing, online war game environments where you're going to die if you make the wrong decision, sustained extreme performance improvement environments. One of the things that struck us as we looked at all this, despite the diversity of the environments, every participant had a very specific form of passion. And we ended up calling it the passion of the explorer, because again, passion is used so loosely. Passion of the explorer to us has three components based on the interviews and the experience we had with these people. One is a long-term commitment to a domain. they're in this for the long term, and not just commitment to learn about the domain or to be in the domain, but to make an increasing difference in the domain over time. So they're committed to doing something with increasing impact in that domain. Second dimension of it is a notion of what we call a questing disposition, which is what's your reaction when confronted with an unexpected challenge? I would say in most work environments today, the reaction is avoidance. You know, try to ignore it, maybe it'll go away. If it doesn't go away, try to hide it. If that doesn't work, you kludge your way through it, but your key is to get back to your assigned task. The passionate explorer actually gets excited about those unexpected challenges. This is an opportunity for me to get to that next level. I've never seen this before. What would I do? And if they don't get these unexpected challenges, they quickly get bored and move to another environment where they will get those challenges. And then finally, there's a third component, which is what we call a connecting disposition, which is what's your reaction when confronted with one of those challenges? Some of us, our immediate reaction is we'll go into a room somewhere, we'll figure it out, and we'll come back out with our answer and reveal it. The passionate explorer, their first reaction is, no, who can I connect with? Who out there has relevant expertise, experience that can help me get to a better answer faster about this unexpected challenge? They're constantly connecting out to try to learn faster. And so these three elements, when they come together, I think are really powerful in terms of accelerating learning. Think about those three attributes. What would you like for somebody who's going to learn faster? Those are very helpful. And I think in the context of ecosystems, part of it is the notion of connecting people who have passion together. And specifically in the ecosystem dimension, I would say one of the big issues I see is that, again, in a world of scalable efficiency, we basically have adopted a view of ecosystems. All companies have ecosystems, supply chain, distribution channels, partners of various types, but it's basically driven by a zero-sum view of the world. There's a given set of assets and resources, and the only question is which of us is going to get how much of the existing resources. And so from day one, you are into an adversarial kind of a view of the other participants in the ecosystem. And what's powerful to us is when you think about a different kind of culture and values in an ecosystem where the driver is how do we learn faster together. Now you move from a zero-sum view of the world where the assets are fixed, the resources are fixed, to a positive sum view of the world where the more we collaborate together and the faster we all learn, the more resources there are going to be for us to share. And so that drives a very different set of behaviors than that zero-sum view of the world, which again I think is increasingly dysfunctional in the kind of world we're heading into.
Awesome. So I have 4 people in the queue to ask questions. No surprise. I have Katz, Noah, Pete, and Ahmed.
Great.
So I'll let you guys be in charge of your own order for the next cohort of 4 questions.
Hey, John.
Hi there.
Hey, I really loved what you had to say, and I could not agree with you more. And I was just wondering, of all of the companies that you've talked to in your research, who would you say has gone furthest down this journey into creative discovery, continuous learning, allowing people to find their way through their jobs in their own way? Which company has gone furthest, and what criteria, and how has leadership allowed that to happen?
So I can't point to any individual company that I would say has done it all the best. What we found is, examples of companies that have done interesting things. So again, back to the ecosystem notion and learning through ecosystems beyond your company. One of the companies that we've spent a lot of time with is a company actually in China called Lianfeng. And they operate with an ecosystem of 15,000 business partners on a global scale. So it's a very large, diverse ecosystem. Their customers, by the way, are apparel designers, Calvin Klein, Ann Taylor, et cetera. But one of the things that struck us, we spent a lot of time studying them for a variety of reasons, but we also went out and interviewed participants in their network. And one of the questions we asked was, well, why are you part of the Li and Feng network? Without exception, top of mind, no prompting, the answer we got back from everybody that we talked to was because we learn faster as part of the Li and Feng network than we ever could on our own or as part of anyone else's network. And I will tell you, I've interviewed many partners of Western companies. I have never once heard that answer, because we learn faster. Are you kidding me? So that's one example. Another example, just in terms of work environment redesign within a company. One of the case studies we've done is around a company called LiveOps. There's noise. I don't know. Somebody. There we go. So LiveOps is very interesting. They run customer call centers on an outsourced basis for other large companies. The interesting thing about LiveOps is they have no customer call centers. They actually have 20,000 people who work for them. All of them work from their homes. And they've created a very sophisticated network to route the calls to the right person in the right home at the right time. But what was interesting in terms of the learning, the scalable learning, number one, they took inspiration from an online video game called World of Warcraft. And for those who are familiar with it, one of the attributes or one of the aspects of World of Warcraft is every player has a real-time performance dashboard that gives you feedback in real time on how you're doing on multiple dimensions of performance. And they said, why don't we give every one of our workers one of these real-time performance dashboards? Now, the problem is, I think if most traditional companies did that, they would use the performance dashboard as an instrument of punishment, right? You're falling behind on these 3 dimensions of performance. You have 6 months to get your act together, or you're going to be fired. What LiveOps did was very different. First of all, they invited the workers to ask for help. They said, if you're having performance issues, we're going to create an online discussion environment where you can post your performance issue. I'm having trouble handling this kind of call for these reasons. Does anybody have any ideas or can help me? And even more importantly, they started to watch, recognize, and reward the workers who were emerging as coaches and helpers of the workers with performance issues. So what they were doing was creating a very powerful peer-to-peer learning environment where everybody was learning faster. And a key part of it was that willingness to ask for help, which gets to the cultural question that Cosmin raised earlier. In most scalable efficiency organizations, asking for help is a sign of weakness. You don't want to ask for help. You're supposed to know everything that needs to be done. You just do your job. So very different kind of culture and set of practices and work environment to help accelerate learning and performance improvement.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thanks.
So Noah, you are up.
Hey, yeah, I'm Noah, and I'm currently working on a project called Kumakery and looking at free collaboration in networks and how people can be rewarded for their contributions across organizational boundaries. And one of the things that I was really happy to hear your explanation of the multiple types of passion, because that was so the first thing on my mind. And then the second thing that's on my mind is just about these sort of new requirements for organizational structures. It seems like they require that people are more learning oriented, have passion, maybe have more self-management. And I'm wondering, like, what percentage of people do that well, and what kind of tensions that might set up around people who aren't necessarily as self-managing and self-directed. And also, in terms of forming teams, what the role of the organizational purpose is for both selecting people who have a high enough passion level within the domain to contribute and learn, and and also direct the kind of sort of passionate forces that people might have towards a more common purpose. So just sort of reframing or restating, what's the role of how many people can be passionate learners, and what's the role of the purpose of an organization in shaping that passion?
Great set of questions. So it prompts me to, I mean, I talk a lot about passion, and I get a lot of pushback on many different dimensions on the topic. And one pushback I get is, oh, come on, John, be realistic. You know, if you're a research scientist in a laboratory, you could be passionate about your work, or product designer, but most work is repetitive tasks that need to be done day in and day out. How could you ever expect somebody to be passionate about that? The other pushback I get is, oh, you know, again, come on, John. You know, some of us genetically or psychologically are capable of passion, but most of us just want to be told what to do and be in a secure, safe environment where we know that we'll get the results that we want. So my response to the second question is about genetics or psychology is, I take people out to a playground and have them watch children 6 or 7 years old. And without exception, every kid out there is really passionate about what they're doing. You know, so somewhere, somehow between that age and where we are today, we lose that passion. And I would argue it's not an accident. It is a result of the institutions we have built, starting with our schools and then going on with our work environments that say, if you have a passion, that's great. There's a playground out there, or after hours, you can pursue whatever hobby or sports you want. And, you know, that's where your passion needs to be expressed, not here in the work environment. So I think that that's a key issue. And how do we redesign institutions to tap into the passion, draw it out, amplify it? And in that context, you know, the one example I like to give is what Toyota did in their assembly line operations. You know, they basically went into their workers and said, look, you know, yes, you have some repetitive tasks. This is an assembly line operation, but your real job is to identify problems. And not just identify the problem and file a problem report at the end of your shift. Solve the problem as soon as you spot it. And if you can't solve it, we're going to put a pull cord next to your station. You pull that cord, the assembly line will come to a halt. We'll swarm you with a team of people to help you solve that problem. And you'll be a hero for pulling that cord. You found a problem that needed to be solved. Passion levels went way up on the assembly line because now these people were creative problem solvers. They could see how they were making a difference to the business. And so it brought out passion in a work environment where you would say, wait a minute, how could that ever be? So I think our belief is that, again, it goes back to this notion of work environment redesign. If your goal is to accelerate learning and performance improvement, one key objective is to design a work environment that pulls out that passion that resides within all of us. And so I think there's huge opportunity there, but again, rare examples where this has actually been done.
I'd like to see you deliver that without any passion next time. So I think next we have Pete and then Ahmed, and we have a couple more people who have questions too. We have like 12 scarce minutes left, but for all of them. So go ahead, guys.
Well, I think I can make mine quick. At least, I'm very interested in the feedback, but it's a quick point. My name is Pete Forsyte. I'm with Wiki Strategies, and I do a lot of work with Wikipedia, which informs my observation. Just going back to the tension between scalable learning and scalable efficiency. I want to suggest that I think maybe part of the bridge, a possible bridge between those two, is the careful documentation and dissemination of learning. So the example that I'm thinking of in Wikipedia is when there's a contentious disagreement about an article, and 2 people or 5 people or whatever it is argue about it and discuss it, and bring forward different source materials, etc., over a period of time, and come to a conclusion about how to best cover that topic in the article. An advantage of Wikipedia is that all of that learning and deliberation takes place in the public sphere, and ideally, in the best cases, it's summarized at the end so that the conclusion is understood, and also so that anyone who wants to revisit it in the future can see what has already happened in the past, so that ideally you're not rehashing exactly the same argument over and over again.
Yeah.
So there's there's a process that leads to a result, and there's also a clear documentation of the process that led up to that result. And I'm wondering what what you think of, like, whether there are similar examples in the workplace, or how that can be sort of that dynamic can be leveraged or better understood.
No, it's a great point. I think one key distinction, first of all, I do make the distinction between sharing existing knowledge and creating new knowledge. And I think that for reasons I've talked about, creating new knowledge is the more powerful. But again, a key is, how do you share existing knowledge more effectively? We went through decades of what was known as the knowledge management movement. And the key there was you went and took all your documents and loaded them into some kind of repository and put some tags or something on it to indicate what it was, and then other people could find it. By and large, the experience with those kinds of knowledge management systems has been extraordinarily disappointing, partly because it required quite a bit of effort by the participants. And I think the example you gave around Wikipedia, and there are other examples, one of the exciting things about the digital technology that's evolving is what we call smart capture and sharing of knowledge. So you don't have to go in and record things or deposit things in a repository. It's captured as a result of the interactions that you're having on an ongoing basis, and organized and more and more in an automated way to help people find the resources that are now available. And I think that's one of the interesting things, for example, in these discussion forums. We've spent a lot of time looking at an SAP forum, online forum for application programmers, where they could post issues regarding programming, coding issues they were facing as they were writing an application. And it was a very powerful way to get answers quickly from other programmers who had experienced similar kinds of issues. But one of the powerful elements of that platform was all the problems and all the answers were recorded automatically and available for future. So if you had a coding issue, first thing was to search to see if somebody had already had the problem and what the solution was. So I think that's a key development that helps to accelerate learning. But again, how many organizations have smart capture and sharing platforms or mechanisms to help workers in that context? Very few.
All right, now we have the little chat going with the order for questions. So everybody knows who's next, right?
I believe I'm next. Ahmad.
Ahmad, hi.
Yeah, how you doing, John? Love your work. I'm a former dean at a community college, or dean of workforce development and education, and now I'm doing work around innovating community colleges, and I'm using the ecosystem model. That's kind of what I evangelize. But one of the things I learned as a dean is, and I'm really interested, is what type of practices, because ecosystem thinking is a mind shift. It's a shift. It's a behavior shift. What type of learning practices should we be teaching students to much easier kind of inculcate themselves, or to take deep dives into ecosystems and be effective at it? That's number one. And quickly, you talked about the redefinition of work. Do you think that in doing a redefinition of work that we need to actually kind of move away from the notion of a middle class, because a middle class is such an industrial notion, and I think that's what actually keeps a lot of the workers of the industrial age stuck. John McCain went to Michigan in 2004 and told workers that they were going to lose their jobs. He was 10 points up at the time. Once he said that, he was 10 points down. So do you think we're just using this workforce, I mean, this middle class notion as a way of being self-protective of the truth?
Wow. Great questions. Again, limited time, unfortunately, but happy to continue the discussion in other forums. I would say in terms of learning practices, again, one of the things, I keep going back to this topic of passion, but there are certain behaviors of the passionate explorer, as we analyzed it, that contribute to accelerating learning. And one of them is the notion of willingness to express, to say, I don't know something, I need help. And that, for many of us, that's very countercultural, counterintuitive. Why would you ever do that? You're going to express vulnerability. But one of the things that does by expressing vulnerability is it builds trust with others. If you come on and say, I know everything, I got it all under control, and, you know, hey, I know you're a human being, I know you don't know everything, I know you don't have everything under control, so you've just given me a signal that I'm not going to share any of my issues with you. So I think that to us is one of the key issues, and it goes to leadership. I mean, one of the, the mark of a strong leader in a scalable efficiency world is somebody who has all the answers, who can tell you what to do, when to do it, and that's the mark of a strong leader. We believe the mark of a strong leader in a scalable learning environment is a leader who has the right questions, who knows the right questions, and will be very clear in acknowledging they don't have the answers, and where they're inviting others to work together to help come up with an answer, because the answer would be so powerful, because the question's so important. And I think that's a really interesting shift in terms of learning behaviors, learning practices that again is very different from the scalable efficiency world that we live in today. And on the middle class, I'm not sure I'm going to go there. It's a huge issue, and I think our politicians are doing a great job of everybody's a champion of the middle class, and yet nobody is.
Awesome. So Ralph, you're next. I think this is probably the last question looking at the time.
Good. Ralph, there you go.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi, John. Great to talk to you again after 5 years.
Yes.
For all other ones, I've been in a lean thinking management kind of environment. I worked at BMW while they were scaling up their new plant in Leipzig, where they built the i3 and the i8. And I'm in continuous learning, trying to get new context to where learning is happening. And the thing is, I'm living in Saxony, and there are no big companies. So I know that, John, you are doing the research mostly for large corporations. What's your focus on the SMEs and small companies who are probably easier to transform, perhaps, or to catch at least? And they are under immense pressure because the news is talking about the big corporations and nobody's talking about them. That's just the question I have. What's your point on this?
No, it's good. I think that certainly smaller companies may be easier to make the transition from scalable efficiencies. My experience is most companies, once they get beyond maybe 100 people, are trying to emulate the scalable efficiency model. That's their aspiration, is to become like the big guys. And so I think the challenge and opportunity is to take those companies and show them a different path, a different way that could create much more value over time. I think, by the way, one of the interesting things about scalable efficiency is it is ultimately a diminishing returns proposition. Scalable efficiency is typically about getting to lower and lower cost, and so that has diminishing returns. The lower cost you get, the harder it is to get the next increment of cost reduction. Scalable learning, on the other hand, has the potential, if properly organized and pursued, to become exponential in terms of value creation, increasing returns as opposed to diminishing returns. And I think that's a powerful way to motivate people to make this shift, because I think most of us are experiencing more and more pressure in that scalable efficiency model, and to say there's another path that would allow all of us, not just a few, but all of us to significantly increase the value we're creating and delivering is a powerful way to motivate people.
Wow. Well, I guess that ends the questions, just because of time, not because of lack of questions. So same way I corralled you into doing the first one of these, John. Thanks for doing your first one of these, John. And thank you everybody for participating. This was awesome. It was really fun. So thank you, John. This was great. I hope to do more of these. Again, John will be back every second week to answer your questions. And but next up we have Kurt Carlson, and Kurt's topic is "Your company is dying. Now what do you do?" So he's Wednesday the 25th, same time, 10:30 Pacific, 1:30 Eastern. Then we have David Nordfors on 5 billion customers want a good job, the untapped $100 trillion market for innovation for jobs. So that'll be a great one. That's on Wednesday, June 1st. And we have Cosmin is doing his on June 7th. We're still working on the title. And Bob Cohen as well will be doing one. It seems like they're becoming weekly. So I'm really interested in everybody presenting. But this is fantastic. Thanks again, John. Anybody, if you have questions, you can reach me at ben@scaledriver.com. That's ben at SCALEDRIVER.com. And I'll look forward to seeing you all here again next week. Thanks again, everybody. Thanks particularly to you, John. That was fantastic.
Thank you. Appreciate your participation. Thank you.